All right, so welcome to our CSU Writes webinar on literature reviews. So we're going to talk initially some strategies for starting and finishing your literature review. And we're going to talk about kind of key types, the methods for being able to read critically and be able to do it slowly in order to be able to write quickly. I think if you read, if you pay attention and you're just really pulling what it is that you need out of the literature, it makes it so much easier when you sit down to write because your head is already kind of saturated. You've already, I guess head is not the right word, but you're already saturated, right? And thinking about what it is that you've been reading. So it makes the writing so much easier. If you have to hunt for words and you're not quite sure and you're hemming and you're hawing, my recommendation is if you're going really slow with the writing because you don't have enough information, just stop. That's a great moment to recognize the problem, stop, and then go find some literature, read your literature, figure out what it is that you need to be writing after that. It'll go much more quickly. And then the last things that we're going to talk about is strategies for writing as you read. We'll talk about it as kind of a 4-step process-ish. There's kind of 3 quick steps and then an extension with what we call a matrix. And then there's some additional resources. I've also brought in at the kind of we haven't had this before, but on AI, I just want to talk a little bit about how you might be able to use some tools. And I hesitate because I'm not the expert on using those tools yet. So I'm going to talk about it, but just know that we're going to bring it up if that comes up for conversation. It would be a great one for us to have if you're here in real time after we finish the presentations. And as I mentioned, I think that this feels a lot like eating your vegetables, right? Like some of us love our vegetables, so that's great. But if you're not, if it's one of those things that you know that in order to be healthy, you have to do it, that's kind of what it feels like. But again, I think we can make it really fun. And if you have some really good tools and you feel more confident in what it is that you're doing in the process or the practice that you're engaging in, much more helpful. So some of the things that I'm drawing on today are Patricia Goodson's Becoming an Academic Writer, Christine Feek and John Swale's book on telling your research story and writing a literature review, and some college teaching an essay out of there by Rebecca Price. And she talks about the 4-part literature review process. You can already see that there are many resources that I'm drawing on. And it also means that there's going to be, because this is about the basics, there's going to be a lot of information. So again, pay attention and kind of pick what works for you, figure out what you want to experiment, ask questions, and then we'll build it out later. I'll pop this into the chat and I'll also send it out in a follow-up email. We're behind on those. And for whatever reason, general is misspelled on this one. But just note that there's a handout and it has kind of the methods and advice and resources. The matrix will be talked about. There's some additional information there on note taking. And so I'll send this out. It's one that we've been using for a while. It doesn't include the information on AI, but it's just kind of a good general resource. It has that general outline for a literature review, and then some broad definitions and the common types. So then you don't have to feel like you're racing to take notes, that you really can just pay attention and kind of let the information about literature review wash over you and just kind of grab onto the things that you find most interesting. All right, so general information, definitions, this is where we're going to start out. A review ultimately is both a noun and a verb. So too is writing, by the way. It's both a thing itself, but it's also a thing that you do. Sometimes those kinds of noun and verb words are tricky for us. It means that we have a lot that we could do with it. And if we're not clear, then it can, I don't know, bunch us up just a little bit. How's that? But a review ultimately is a formal assessment or examination of something, right? And that maybe through that, you're going to be able to institute some change or connect it with your product, what it is that you're putting together in your document. But it's also the process by which you are reviewing, that you yourself are engaging with this literature, that you're bringing it into the document that you are working on. And so then that becomes part of your process as well. So it's a product itself, but it's also part of the writing process. Literature reviews in the things that they are in that kind of noun quality, right? It's as a thing. There are kind of 2 broad definitions for those. One is a standalone document. So earlier when I asked one of the participants if she was working on a standalone document, or if it was a chapter. Some of you will be writing dissertations where your literature review, for example, will be an entire chapter. It will be 20, 30 plus pages, right? It'll be a standalone survey of what's known on that topic. For others, it'll just be portions of a larger document, if you're writing, let's say, a dissertation that has 3 chapters, or you're writing a thesis, that it's likely that you're going to have your literature review as just a portion of that. So then you kind of think about what's the percentage that needs to be literature review, and what is that going to look like? Sometimes literature reviews are standalone within a document. You have sections, right? Your introduction, literature review, methods, findings, discussion, conclusion. Sometimes those are labeled and clearly demarcated. Sometimes, though, these are integrated within. So in my field, oftentimes, in not so much in writing studies, but really in literary studies, your literature is literally integrated and woven within throughout the document and the manuscript that you're working on. In either one of these cases, the product that we're talking about, that literature review describes something that it summarizes it evaluates, clarifies what has come before that informs your research project. And the literature review provides a space for conversation between what scholars before you have said and what you will say. One of the challenges that we face is that we are often, I think almost all of us, I don't know many of us who are, our project and our work is always informed immediately, like that we understand all of the literature and the body of work that we're kind of, our ancestors is a way to think about it, right? What's our legacy? Who are the people who have influenced our work? I think we come to our work through various ways, and we're oftentimes doing the work, and then we have to figure out, like, wait, who's talked about this before? Who's done this before? How is this operating? So we have this kind of limitation of how it is that we do our work, that then needs to be further grounded as we go through the process of explaining our work to other people. And that's one of the challenges we face with the literature review, is we often feel like we should have already known this, or we should know this, and we don't until we are actually doing the review and doing the research. And so that's great. It provides a space for you to learn more about your field and your project. Also gives you a place to craft that conversation within your own document, and to describe what it is that is the conversation that you're entering into. And so you have a lot of control how it is that you represent other people's work and how it connects to the work that you're doing. There are 4 kind of general types of literature reviews and how it is that you shape that conversation. So if we're thinking about the shape of the conversation itself within those literature reviews, you could describe it kind of the story. It's kind of a selection of the relevant research that's gone on in the past that you've kind of synthesized and pulled together as something coherent to set up and describe the work that you've done. It could be something that is systematic. It could be, and this is usually more in health sciences, but make explicit criteria or a protocol, kind of a goal, kind of elimination of bias, that you're really looking at, these are the facts, and this is kind of what has been done in these kind of criteria or protocols. It could be a meta-analysis that you're doing. We'll take a look at an example of a version of that, and gathering and analyzing studies that have the same research questions, and then you kind of pull them all together. Many of you, it sounds like some of you, particularly if you're working in a field that has a lot of research already done, that you will be wading through a fair number of also reviews of the literature that's been done. So that means that you can read those as shorthand, right? They give you kind of a summary of what's already been done with their kind of argument or lens to that research. But they can also kind of give you some sort of meta-analysis. They also give you a bibliography, by the way, something else that you can go, and if you can search through and you can find additional sources, the people who have written on this topic that you weren't aware of, that you realize are really important or have a particular lens that helps you. So you can use broader reviews, use their bibliographies in order to be able to find additional resources that you might not have already located. And there's also something called, focused reviews. Those are more like bibliographic kind of preliminary papers. They may be limited to a specific area of research, such as a methodology. So I know one of you was talking about doing something that seems to me kind of like this kind of focused review of something that's done, but it may not be that you're writing an entirely focused review. It may be that yours is just focusing on a particular kind of system or area. So, all right. There are some common steps, and I want to just say that this is from Mackey and McAvoy's literature review. This is in that handout. It's it simplifies and makes easy for us to see the bare bones of a literature review, which is why I include it here. But it also simplifies the process, and the process can be quite complex. So if we go back and thinking about that reading as you write and that kind of going back and forth and back and forth, that doesn't seem to be represented here so well. So the common steps are you select a topic. We all introduced ourselves with our kind of topics or areas that we research. You search the literature. I love that. It's just a quick thing. Search the literature. You develop your argument based on that, like because you can't know where you are in conversation. To have an argument, to place an argument means that you understand the context in which you're placing that argument. So the literature helps you shape that. But then that survey of the literature, meaning that you're describing it, right? You're giving that survey. What's the big picture? Are you doing it as a narrative? Many of us do that kind of, this is the story of what has come before on this project. And then you also then give the limitations. If you're identifying the gap, what hasn't been done before so that you can describe it. And then you write the review. And I love this, that write the review is like kind of, it makes it all seem so easy. Again, it's going to feel pretty complex. And I know someone, describing it as overwhelming, and it can be, depending on your field. You could be overwhelmed by the sheer amount that you need to read through, and you could be overwhelmed by the lack of information or lack of detail that's there. And what do you do in those instances? So again, you're reading as you write, and that's going to be super helpful. It will help you if you track what it is that you've gathered. Maybe keep a journal. I don't have any journaling information in this session, but I do have workshops that we do on research journaling. But if you just write down where it is that you found information, what it is that you're looking for. Additionally, you could use portions of your matrix for that. It can be really helpful for you to know what are your next steps and to keep things in mind, right? You just put them down on a piece of paper. That way you don't have to carry it with you throughout the day. That relationship between reading and writing, as we mentioned, it's super fluid, right? They're kind of inseparable and super dynamic. And so I don't know if you've had the experience, but I suspect that you have, where when you're reading something, it just sparks all of these new ideas and new approaches or new ways of understanding your topic. Really good research allows for us to do that. So for a moment, I know we've already talked about kind of what we're doing in our research and kind of the literature that we're looking for, but here you just pause for a moment, and I want you to think about you as a research writer. Reader, writer, how do those fit? Oftentimes we'll think about ourselves as researchers, right? We'll think about ourselves as teachers. Sometimes we'll think about ourselves as writers. I don't know. Do many of us think of ourselves as just readers? Like, I'm a reader. Try it on, see how that works. But just knowing that going through the literature review process, it's going to force you to consider how it is that you operate as a reader. And in that, you're going to confront what you find most challenging. And so you can just stop and think about it. Maybe just make a couple notes right here. Like, what do you find most challenging? It'll be helpful for you to identify that. By identifying where it is that you find challenges, mentioned, overwhelm, for example, has come up. Thinking about like, how then do you address that? If you're aware of it, then you can find some strategies, some techniques, some things that help you move through that and work with it. That overwhelm is something that is totally workable. And I think it's necessary at some point when you see the largesse of the work that you're doing. And then you have to kind of figure out like, what's your way through it, right? So some of the common reading challenges that writers face are when to read versus when to write. So if you had that one down, if you were thinking, yeah, I don't know when to do this. I don't know how to space out my time. I don't know how to set aside time for reading. That's one. How to read well, right? So how to be insightful and smart and to keep track of the details as you're moving through what can be lots and lots of different articles, perhaps. How to read a lot in a short period of time. Then how to keep track of what you've read over a long period of time, because you will not be able to read everything that you need for your literature review within a day, right? And keep it all fresh in your mind. It's going to take a while. So how do you track that? And then to think about when you read for writing, that timing of it, like how do you track it and how do you make use of it over time? I really think that, again, you kind of do these back and forth. So you can do it at the same time and you can do it in the same day if you want. We're going to look at some scheduling techniques, some things that we look at when we do scheduling in general. And we'll talk about it in relation to doing literature reviews. Like how can you shape your reading, writing schedule to suit you during the literature review process. And so, yes, you really can do them on the same day. And if you treat, again, reading and writing as a single surface, that dynamic process, it'll feel a lot easier. Again, think about the Mobius. I love the Mobius as a model for being able to get hold of something that feels pretty unstructured at the time that I'm going through it. So that I know that it's all right. I'm just gathering what it is that I'm going to be reading. Then I'm reading and then I'm writing and then I'm reading and then I'm writing. I'm noting, I'm putting things down, I'm tracking in my matrix, right? So there's just kind of this process and this way that you'll get used to it. My process, by the way, is unlikely to be exactly your process. You may use different types of software. You might have different tools or things that you like to use to be able to support your work. But I think that Mobius model of like keeping it smooth and just one, right after the other can be really helpful. And it can tamp down some of the tension and the pressure and sometimes just the stress we feel in putting together a literature review because it's a big task. All right. So that scheduling and being able to prioritize not just writing time. And we talk a lot in CSU Writes about writing time, but we always, when we talk about writing, talk about it in terms of the project and things that are moving your project forward. So it can include reading, it can include coding, it can include data, it can include any number of things, right? So just think about like, how do you prioritize that? Yeah, and Mobius it's not an acronym. If you just do a quick Google search and look up Mobius loop, or even you can look up Klein bottle, Klein, Klein, that's right, bottle. And those are single-sided surfaces. They are real. And there's a whole study of mathematics behind it. So it's interesting, but we're using it as an analogy, a way to describe what's the processes that can feel pretty all over the place. And I think they're actually pretty smooth if we can get our systems down. So that's why I use that Mobius model. Thank you for the question. But I think if you're looking at 2 to 3 hours at a time, that's probably the maximum that you want to be doing at any writing session, but also probably for any reading session as well. If you try to read intensive research and like dense writing for 3 hours, oh, you know what that feels like. So make sure that you're pacing it well. Keep a project or a writing log, something that allows for you to, oh yeah, thank you for putting that in the chat. Something that allows for you to know where you are in that process. And I've already mentioned that, right? And bring reading to your writing practice early. We talk a lot in CSU Writes about integrating writing into your projects from the very beginning. For those of you who are field researchers, you're out in the field, make sure that you have a journal, you're keeping notes, right? There's certain ways that you're integrating writing already. And doing it conscientiously means that you're not avoiding writing, you're using writing as part of the project itself, the project and that process by which you're going to be putting together all of your articles, your thesis, whatever it is that's going to be the kind of output of your research. That output of research is always written, interestingly enough. I mean, you can have patents too, but those are also written. Right? The pleasures of academic writing ultimately come out of these brief, frequent, low stress, highly rewarding encounters with projects that we enjoy. And that goes for the reading portion too. And I suspect that most of you enjoy the reading if you have enough time to do it. I talked about scheduling methods. For those of you who attended the earlier scheduling conversations that we had in the semester, you'll recognize these weekly kind of calendars. And there are ways that you can prioritize writing in your week, and you can think about, project A as your writing and project B as your reading. That might be a way that you do it on the same day. You split it apart. Could be that you need to spend more time reading during your literature review. So maybe you spend 2 hours or 2.5 hours in the morning reading, and then you spend half an hour later on writing about what it is that you've read after you've gotten some distance, you've had lunch, whatever the things are, right? So you can pair those really, really nicely. I think during your studies and depending on where you are in your project or your process, it can be a really nice structure for you to be able to pair those together. And you'll find that you learn a tremendous amount in that process. One of the reasons why we become experts or how we become experts is that we work through this literature and we understand what has come before. We can, in the words of one of my faculty advisors when I was in graduate school, we can wield the field. I just love that expression, how it is that you are able to draw quickly on what's been done before and who's doing what. Really, really necessary if you're going to be an expert in your field. And I think we're going to have some background noise, so I'm going to put in my AirPods real quick. And all right. So can you still hear me? Give me a thumbs up or something in the chat. Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So there are other ways, though, that you could schedule in your reading and writing. It doesn't have to be on the same day. You could do it sequential days, right? For me, by the way, this schedule, the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, this looks a lot more like what I did in graduate school. But my reading time was in the afternoon, evening, actually. And then I would write in the mornings. Part of that was because I was doing literary studies and the very evidence, the work that I was working through and was in the text, right? So I had to work through words in order to get my evidence. And so that for me made sense. Read and prep the night before, write the morning after, kinds of things. So you can think like creative ways and things that work for your schedule. You might be able to pair them together. Again, these are if we're talking about like if you have multiple projects, usually is how we talk about this. But you could think about your reading in relation to your writing. I like this kind of scheduling or just being creative with your schedule and thinking how it is that you're going to build in when to read versus when to write. If we get too caught up in the when do we write, then it becomes all about the production. We're interested in getting the thing done. But we are forgetting about then the process and what it's really going to take for us to be able to quote unquote get the thing done. And if you get too far ahead of yourself, what you'll find is you're actually slow yourself down, that you are spending a lot of time spinning your wheels trying to get something written that you're actually not prepared to write. And so if you need to go back and gather more, read more, go and do that because it's going to make things a lot more smooth, a little bit quicker for you, for sure. There's something called the journalistic method. Cal Newport talks about it this way. And you could do 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. This could work, by the way. This is one of the ways that I read theory in graduate school is I could only handle 15 minutes to half an hour of Derrida a day, right? Like if you know 20th century philosophy, you know how dense that is, right? So how much can you read at a time, right? Just this much. And move forward. So there's some shortcuts that you can take though, and these are helpful for you to know. And this is a way for you to still read for detail and knowledge. It's really easy for us to get caught up in all of the little rabbit holes and things we could go down of interest. It's also easy for us to get caught up in like the bigness of everything that we're gathering and how expansive it is and how it could be overwhelming, what it is that we don't know already and what's already been written in the field. But there are ways that you can narrow it down. We talked a little bit about this earlier. I liked the advice of being able to kind of identify kind of like what's the larger portion of your topic, like where's that coming from in your field versus then very specifically who's covering it and what's that kind of more narrow topic, and then what's your project and very specifically kind of the area of expertise. So you can think about it that way as a funnel. Some of you talked about in terms of like branches and other areas that you're moving into and interdisciplinary projects. But ultimately, regardless, it's really helpful for you to find and know the foundational texts. Oftentimes, if you're in an established field and in a particular area, there will be a handful of people that quote unquote everyone knows, that everyone references, right? You need to find those foundational texts. You need to read them for yourself. You need to understand from your own perspective and kind of work through that material and just know This is what other people have said about your field and or your project. When you get foundational texts, those are the ones that you really need to know. So you should read them slowly and return to them often. Think about the things that when you go up for a defense, whether you're doing a thesis defense or some sort of proposal defense, or it could be your dissertation defense. What are the things that you want to be able to speak to well? What do you want to be able to reference clearly with depth? And those are the things that you want to read slowly and go back to. Anything that's ancillary, meaning kind of supplementary, it's kind of related, it's kind of interesting, it might be a new pathway forward, you're not quite sure. Those you can either skim or just kind of take some quick notes and just be aware of what they offer. And so those are some strategies that you can use to like narrow down that kind of bigness, the largest of the field, into something that's a little bit more containable for you. People will ask sometimes like, well, how many foundational texts or how many? And that really, you got to talk to your advisors. You got to ask about your field and kind of get a sense for that. What are the most important ones? But I think if you're trying to track more than about 20 texts in your field and be able to hold them in your mind, that's a lot. So I would keep it to, 10-ish if you can. But again, talk with your advisors and see what they recommend for you to know. Some might just say you only need to know these two. Right? You never know. There's a 3-step method that you can use. And then the 4th step is kind of adding on the matrix. But for critical reading, for being able to identify what's in that document, pre-read and skim it just to get a sense of what's there. Prime your mind, right? Like just prep it so that you can, like priming a pump, you can kind of get things moving a little bit more easily. If you just kind of know it's 30 pages and there are 6 sections and there are some dense paragraphs here and the rest of it, this is all graphs, right? That's nice to know. And then you read and just read through as much as you can, just like without a pen, without highlighting, without marking anything. Just kind of focus on what's there. If there's anything that you don't know that's going to get in your way of not understanding, then look up terms in the dictionary, for example. You might need to do that. But this should be your time focused on the text. Think about where your focus is, right? It's on that text. What's there and what information is there. And then take notes after that. Go back, identify what you really need to bring out for your notes. And then if you can, summarize them. I know some of you already have, and I think we've talked in other sessions about having a strategy where you read and then you summarize in your own words. That's a really helpful exercise. You could also then summarize, then compare to the abstract and kind of see like, how close are you? And by the way, you don't want to just copy and paste, right? The abstract as the summary. You want to be able to do that work, because by doing that work, it's a process of kind of digestion, right? You're digesting the material that's in that document so that you can then draw on it later. If you're just copying and pasting, you're not able to draw on anything later unless you have your computer and you can do a search and process it, right? So you need to have some way of getting it so that it's usable for you in speech, something that you can talk about, something that's when you sit down to write, that you can just, it flows because you already know that material and how you want it to talk about it. May not be that you know that all of the details of the citation or of those, right? Those are other things for you to know, but you kind of know how it is that those ideas in that document make connections for you, how it is that they connect. I highly recommend doing something like a double entry note-taking system. You're not required to do anything, but if this lands for you, please take it and put it in your back pocket and start practicing with it. And it's as simple as drawing a line down a page. And I like handwritten notes, but other people prefer doing something that's digital, and a Word document works just as well. But on one side of the page, you have the content. And then on the other side of the page, you have your response to that content. It doesn't have to be matching up specifically, but it can be helpful. So the content, whatever's there in the document, or the thesis, the key points, the data, the findings, whatever the significance or the contribution to the field is, are there quotations that you want to hang on to? We'll talk about quotations in context of the matrix pretty soon, but what is it that you want to hold on to? Your summary could be there. That's something that in summary, you are representing in your own words something that another person has written or said. So you're summarizing, or could be paraphrasing, depending on how big and what you're doing. But that summary is factual. It's of the document. It's not of your response. And then the things that you know, and I just love that the stuff that you know is important. I think we come across a lot of things in our studies where we're like, whoa, I know this is important. It's placed in a significant place in this document. Everybody, it seems like everything around it is suggesting that this is important information or an idea, and I don't understand it. That happens a lot, but we don't understand everything just because we've read it, and we don't understand, and everything just because we're in the field. We have to process and work through it. And so if there's something there that you know is important, but you don't know what it is or understand it fully, just write it down. That's a great place then for you to have a response. Then you can connect to other articles, you can look up things, look up words and definitions. What are your opinions or thoughts on the things that you do know? But then you can have conversations with your committee, with your advisor. If you think it's important enough, right, take that with you. And so don't be afraid of writing down things that you don't know. Just make sure that you get clarity on them. You use it as an opportunity, and you're clear with yourself to say, I don't understand this. I want to understand more. Or I don't understand this, and I don't think it's worth my time. And then you can also say, that's not worth me spending any more time with. I don't understand it, and I don't need to. So that happens too. The Cornell method is something different, by the way. Some of you might be familiar with doing like 2-column entries or something like that, where you have a column where you put in what is it's usually some definition or something that is informative that you need to pull in information. And I think the Cornell method's great for drawing facts, but it's not something really great for you to reflect and be able to do your own research. So just keep that in mind. If you're familiar with the Cornell method, just know that I wasn't talking about the Cornell method in that 2-entry column, something different. I've mentioned the matrix and being able to use a matrix to continue to digest what it is that you're coming across in your literature review. I don't recommend doing a literature review matrix for everything. You can keep a track depending on how you're tracking your sources. Most people are using something like Zotero or Mendeley, some sort of citation software management system now, in order to be able to manage all of the documents, right? So many PDFs come into our lives these days, and citations. Like, how do you manage that? So this is something separate. This is about you being able to manage what you're reading and the content that you're coming across, so that you can understand your field better, so you can understand your project better, and so that you can understand the relationship between the work that you've done and the relation and other people's work, so that you can share that with your readers. And so that positionality of your work is really important. And it means that you fully understand kind of what's been done before. For some of you in fields, some fields, it'll be pretty easy to articulate that. For others, particularly if you're in really abstract, analytical, theoretical fields, wondering about statistics, mathematics, for example, some of those can be a little bit more tricky, right, to do that. A matrix, you'll have to try it out and just see if it works for you. This comes from Patricia Goodson's book and her models, and she would track things like author, year, title, citation, digital object identifier, what's of interest in her review, like why she's pulling from that document, why it's worth putting into her matrix, quotations, and where the file is. So for her, kind of gives her kind of all of these cues that she needs in order to be able to track things quickly. But notice for me, I used it slightly differently. I'll give you an example of how I have used it in the past. I don't use it exactly the same way now. I work with graduate students and others who are adding things to the matrix. So we kind of use it in a slightly different system. But we have in general the same kinds of things. We have author, and then we combine citation here. The critical approach, quotations, what terms are important. This is for a document in literary studies, the project in literary studies. So that's how we were using it. And where the file is located at, for me, that's really helpful. And then author networks and reviews. Notice that this is a place for me to build into my literature review, forward thinking, who do I want to be in contact with? So where are they located? Where are they going to be? What conferences are we going to be attending? Can I put some notes in there on what it is that they've done so then I can connect with them? It's a really smart way to kind of think about what are they saying? What's your work? What are you saying? And then how is it that you're going to be connecting? You can use a matrix for that. And then your own categories, whatever it is that you think is going to be important, and in pulling from a document, being able to identify what that document is, why it's important, and what's in there, and then how it is that you're going to be using it. And so those are kind of the things that you want to be thinking about as you're moving through the really important pieces. Not all documents need to be, again, added into a matrix. This is something that you want to spend some more time with, that you know that you want to be able to reference. These are the things that you want to be able to talk about, the documents that you want to talk about, again, in your defense, and when you're doing presentations that you want to be savvy with. Ultimately, a matrix allows for you to do things like consolidate your notes if you're reading for easy access. If you're doing that double entry note-taking system, things can get a little wild and messy. You can consolidate them so that you have given another kind of round of processing to that. You can organize your material in a searchable manner, especially if you're using a spreadsheet, right? You can capture your thoughts sort of as you're reading. It's not really as you're reading, but it's like in that process of reading through that text for recall later. You get to document what it is that you need from a source. And so maybe there are other questions and things that you have about the project or the process or the research, whatever those things are. And you could put those in notes in a matrix as well, or say that this connects to other people's work. So you could use a matrix to be able to track all of those connections if you'd like. And then it also helps you identify writing styles or academic work or other things that you would be interested in, maybe modeling on your own. Like if you got really good um, uh, literature that you're reading through and you're like, these articles are amazingly crafted. I'd really like to be able to write like this one day. Keep track of that. Say, this is a really good article. This would be a role model for me. I want to see how this is put together. So you can do that too. And of course, I always say you can look cool doing a matrix. But that's the little joke for those who, I'm assuming most people know the matrix, but if you don't, look it up. It's really cool. But this is one might look like. This one I put together for a piece on enacted criticism that I did for a certain panel at the Modern Language Association conference back in 2017. But notice, and I think for me, the key thing to share with you is that there are certain terms here that are really helpful, criticism versus critique, and I give page numbers and I just give quick references. Note that this is an interlibrary loan book at the time when it came out, but and then I have down the author network, like where is this person? And then can I connect with that person? And I did connect with that person at that conference. So just something to think about as useful, right? A matrix should be useful to your purposes. So let's get to the point where you're actually writing the review itself, not reading any longer. Now you're doing the writing of it. How do you put that together? And how do you talk about what they said versus what it is that you say, right? And there's a way to think of it in terms of past, what's been done in the past, where your research is and what you're writing in the present, and that it's going to be going out there and it's going to be influencing people in the future. So that's how kind of a way to think about the story that you're going to be kind of engaging with as a process. And then the story that you want to tell on the page has to do with that kind of past into the present. When you give credit where credit is due, right? It gives credibility to your own work. So when you say, this is what they have said, this is what has come before, it's not just a requirement of the field. It actually grounds your conversation, and it shows others that you have done due diligence, that you're not just like out there wandering around just saying things that aren't founded in your field, that there actually is a legacy to the conversation and what you're saying. And there's an element of that's of course ethical too. Not all research around the world is covered or given credit in the same way. So depending on where you come from, there may be different ways of giving credit. Increasingly, though, and most journals are turning to a very Western kind of English-based citation process. But there are lots of variations even within kind of the Western world on what is considered required to be cited. And so if you're ever in question, just reach out to your advisor, to your committee, and make sure that you're clear on giving credit where credit is due in research. It also, for people, is just give grounds what you're saying so that they know that you're, again, not off in la la land. All right. So let's take a look at a chapter that's a portion of Barry Bozeman's and Jan Udy's The Strength in Numbers, New Science of Team Science. And this is pulled, as you note, from me talking about my own matrix and my own literature reviews earlier. This is a text that I refer back to. So it's one that I use, and so I have it in a matrix. I've read it, I've taken notes on it, I've digested it, and I still must go back to this book in order to be able to kind of pull new kind of things that I haven't worked with or thought about or learn again. And we have faulty memories, so it's good to have good records and good texts that you can go back to. So here what you see on the left side of the screen is the table of contents, so you can get the sense of the chapters and how they flow. So the first one is a research collaboration and kind of giving a big picture of that. And then next chapter is classifying some of those their research collaboration outcomes. They did a huge study of scientists and looking at how science teams operate. Notice that chapter 3 here, this is a standalone literature review. The entire chapter is dedicated to the literature on research collaboration and team science. And then after that, they have thinking systematically, research collaboration and effectiveness. And this is, in their own words, are the research scientists that they interviewed and have data from. Then they talk about decision making and in those teams and kind of systems and ways that you can put together teams, and here enhancing effective teams. So it's about building out effective teams and how they operate. Again, this is a standalone chapter, and I wanted to just have us pay attention to a way that they shape it so that we can kind of see how they build in where they are, what others say, and what it is that they say in a pretty smart way. So in this highlighted portion here, it's a application readers. You may wish to pass this bypass this chapter, right? So if you're if you're not really interested in the research, they say you can go ahead and skip this. But just know there's a whole chapter here that if you want it, it can be grounded. And they say, of course, many of the findings of the research collaboration and team science literature have direct implication for improving effectiveness, but some of these lessons can be absorbed from the reading of other chapters in this book. For scholarly readers, those research who have interest in research and theory of collaboration because it's the object of their own study or because of intellectual curiosity, this chapter's treatment of the literature may have value, especially since it's up to date, at least at the time of this writing. In appendix, we covered, other kind of propositional inventory table, and this table can serve as an application of the reader's concern with finding specific insights into specific research effectiveness and issues, while at the same time helping the scholar reader develop a more comprehensive and detailed knowledge of the literature. So notice that they give us basically a map to their own literature review on how it is that they're covering. That's why it's kind of this meta quality. There's this kind of awareness, self-awareness of what it is that they're putting together and why they're putting it together. Also note, in that kind of awareness, they let readers know what's going to be helpful for them or not helpful for them. I'm not saying that this is an approach that you have to take, but I'm saying that literature reviews are pretty broad. And in this case, with a standalone literature review as a chapter, they're just letting their readers know, we understand that there may be various ways that people will engage with this literature in this chapter. And so they have this kind of breakdown of what's the purpose of it. At some point within your literature review, you're going to have to state, very much like you do for the overall project, like what's the purpose or what's the general content of this literature review, and then you'll kind of integrate depending on the document that you're writing. So there are any number of ways that you can do this. What you want to do is be able to scale your literature review to your manuscripts, and it's again location and the argument that you're making in the field. All right. I'm going to pull from one of my colleagues who she just left North Carolina State University, where she worked with graduate students, and now she's at Pittsburgh. But she has a couple ways approaching literature review that I think help us think about the crafting and the writing of it. And we both love PhD comics, but it's kind of, I'll just copy and paste all the papers I've written and make my thesis, and you're done, and like Control Z. It's very cute. All right, so Rebecca Price, she talks about this process, and she says you developing a topic, searching the literature, narrowing the scope, and synthesizing any prior research. Again, this 1, 2, 3, 4-part process. Yes, that's absolutely. And if you feel a little overwhelmed by the time you get to narrowing the scope, searching the literature, yeah, you're doing it right. It's going to be a lot going on. We can talk about it as if it's simple, and yet at the same time, while you're going through the process, it's just going to be challenging. And so what you want to have is really good systems for how you're tracking, right? And then when you're writing about it and you're kind of pulling it all together, you want to think about this guy. She talks about it as a texture. This is my friend Katie. She talks about the texture of literature reviews and that analysis. And she says that you can talk about, break down one study and kind of do a paragraph length summary of that, the aims, the special, sections, or the implications and the relevance of it. You want to make sure that you have those three components to it so that you know what it is that's going on in that. But you can describe that then for your readers in very clear terms. I like thinking about this as kind of a texture, the kind of the ways it can be smooth reading, but it might be covering a lot of material. But when you're doing a synthesis, that's where you're pulling not just one one review, right, of a topic, and just saying, or a piece, and just saying this is what they wrote about. Now you're pulling together multiple, and synthesis is one of those skills that happens, and I think you develop over time through the process of writing. You're not born knowing synthesis, right? But being able to combine multiple studies and then describe them in one sentence or a paraphrase, and be able to use multiple citations within that, that's something that's a great skill. It's also really helpful if you have either a matrix or a table or Obsidian, a software, or if you're using Zotero and the tags, a way for you to kind of pull together how many different sources you have that are talking about this one thing. You may have multiple studies, but you have this kind of one topic. How are you going to describe what it is that others have done all of this work? It helps you identify trends in the field. You can ultimately summarize what's kind of state of the art, or anticipate and identify what's going to be state of the art. It helps you give kind of high level examples as well. You can pull on those quickly, and then you can compare things or compare results from different folks. So when you're doing a synthesis, just a reminder that you're pulling together multiple things and you're able to describe it together fully, but for your purposes in that document. It should always be shaped towards your audience and towards how it relates to your study. So that texture part is you're pulling all of the synthesis, all of these other studies together, and you're using that to describe what has come before, or how it is that yours aligns, how it's different, and so that then you're going to be making logical moves based on your synthesis. So you need to synthesize well, so you can also then describe what you've done well. That synthesizing, again, you can tag it. That might be helpful. You can cluster perhaps themes together, related and relevant information. You could use a matrix to just like, these are the themes that I'm identifying in all of these different texts where you can connect ideas. And then I would also add that when you organize and develop your review, clearly connect what it is that they say with what you say. If you just think about that, what do they say and what do I say? Always bring those together. And rhetorically, there's strategies you can do it. If you look up they say, I say on the internet, you can find a book and with indexes that will give you little templates of what they say and then how to say what you say. You can also find AI tools. This is just a quick search on Google for AI tools for literature review, and some of you may already be using these. Research Rabbit, I know, is really popular. Someone in our writing retreats has been using Cite, another Elicit, having good results with Elicit. But also note that even with using AI software, while it feels like it should be automatic and immediate, you will find that they're always limited in what it is that they can gather, limited in what it is that they can pull and summarize or synthesize for you, and that you will always need to dig through, refine, add to any kind of compilation of a review that they've pulled together. Don't just take it as being done. Just make sure that you're working through it. And that means that you have to know what's there that's been pulled if you're using an AI tool. So you're still the person who's pulling together the tool, using the tool. Just a little note about writing. So if we're talking about it as a tool for pulling together materials for your research, who said what in the field, right? What articles, what texts are out there? Then here we're talking about like how do you write with it? And just some caveats and some reminders that while ChatGPT in the past, like early on, quickly was cited as an author, and that is now for most journals a no-no. And so there editors across the spectrum are looking at like how do we work with texts that we know are in part include AI, whether that's in the gathering or the generating of a synthesis or content. And ultimately what they're saying is that it's really tricky to have a tool that is not sentient be listed as an author, as an authorizing subject of a text, right? So they're having lots of conversations, these, editors, and that ultimately it's important for authors to just be upfront, disclose if you're using it. Some journals, you want to be careful with this because some journals will not accept articles where you have used AI in part of its generation. Others are more open. So you want to make sure that you know the endpoint of where it is that you're taking your piece, whether that be for submission to your committee, to the, which will go through, department standards and through the graduate school standards for submission. Are you kind of aligned with those? Or are you submitting it for publication? Is it going out to a journal? Just making sure that you know and are aware. Some publishers are deciding, and this is Springer and Nature, and this is a bit dated, but that ChatGPT cannot be listed as an author. So, but they're not banning it outright. Elsevier, they say that authors can use AI tools to improve the readability and the language, right? But notice that these are not synthesizing notions. They're not saying go ahead and use AI in order to be able to put together your literature review. No one is there yet. So the literature review is still yours. And for all the various reasons that we've described before, the pleasure of being able to read and engage with the ideas that you're most interested in, the capacity to be able to grow and learn in the field through the work that's been done before. And so just keep that in mind as well. Tools are super useful, but just make sure that you check the policies, that you disclose anytime that you use it. And just know that when you use OpenAI, that it necessitates an open discussion with your mentors, your advisors, your program, just any kind of program decision makers that you're using it. So just make sure that everybody's on board and everybody's clear before you do. And I've made this case before, and I think I really need to write a piece for the Chronicle of Higher Education. But I think talking about AI and talking about ethical use really feels like having conversations about safe sex. It's really kind of like makes people a little squeamish, and nobody really wants to talk about it. But I think there are safety issues when we're looking at building careers and understanding and building our own knowledge based on use of AI. And by the way, I'm not anti AI at all. I think it's a great tool, but I do think that we are far from understanding kind of how it is that we use it well. And so the review seems like a place where would be wanting to kind of take some shortcuts. And so just please know that it's a great tool. You just have to be the person who's in charge of how you're using it. And you also have to disclose how you're using it. All right. And just lastly, some workshop takeaways. Experiment with strategies, make them your own. Read slowly in order to be able to write fast. Another matrix reference, just for those of you who are in the know. And ultimately, eat your vegetables because everybody wants you to be healthy through graduate school in the writing process. And until we meet again, may your writing be brief, frequent, low stress, and highly rewarding. I look forward to seeing you at future events. I'm going to open it up for a couple minutes of conversation for those who are here in the room. And if you need anything, please reach out.